not being the 4th of July anymore, people still do fireworks. And, my family may have to take my very anxious dog into the basement so that she is a little distracted from the noise. If you hear any in the background, I apologize if it's distracting, but that's why I'm not in the basement where I normally do it. Um, I also was going to do it in the dining room, which is where I sometimes do my live streams if you look at my backgrounds, but um, this is my least favorite background. It's the only one where I have to stand, but it's okay. It's an exception, it's a rare occasion. I just couldn't guarantee either of those locations to actually give me the privacy to do what I need. So, I'm going to be a little bit more organized today than usual. I have a new schedule. If you don't know, I change my channel banner every time I make a change to my schedule. And if you ever want to know if I've changed when I'm going live or uploading videos or whatever, just check my channel banner. The information you're looking for should be there. So, this is a show that I have. It's kind of like a podcast. Excuse me, like a YouTube series of whatever. I don't know what you call it. I have a playlist of every episode. This is episode 19. Um, and I do this now. The new schedule is every Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, followed by on Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, an episode of a different show on my other channel. Link to that channel is in the description. It's called Philosophical Psychology, called Just Between Us. So, Fallen World on my main channel and Just Between Us on my other channel, Philosophical Psychology. Um, so, if you want to subscribe to that channel, it's in the description. And Just Between Us is sort of like a more in-depth, discussion-oriented version of this, where this is more kind of like a class. It's just meant to be educational and just strictly focused on the topic. I've been a little bit loose with how I structured it in the past, but I want to be more organized, so I printed out a list of bullet points that I want to make. Very small, hardly takes up any space on the page, but it's enough to, for me to know what I want to cover. So I'm going to try and give myself 3 to 4 minutes on each topic, and I have 6 bullet points, so 3 to 4 minutes times 6, it's going to be under a half hour. That's my goal. So, sometimes if I don't do this, or if I can go on for hours, which is why I want Just Between Us to be for that. So if you want more in-depth discussion on this topic, if you found it interesting and you want to hear more about it, you have more questions and you didn't get to catch this live, Sunday night, same time, Eastern time, we're going to be doing a more in-depth discussion. If no one joins, I'll just talk and go more in-depth by myself. But either way, that will be there, and I always check my comments, so you should be able to reach me if you have any further questions. I'm really excited for tonight's topic. It's called Protecting Children. I'm getting some comments from my boyfriend. I don't know how to check a channel banner. I'll just ask you directly. That's because you used 12 font, Times New Roman double-spaced. Thanks for reminding me of my college days without reminding me of my college days. You haven't checked mine. Um, the timing of him saying I haven't checked his, if you couldn't tell, there's a slight delay. I see your comments about 10 to 15 seconds after you post them. Or rather, you hear what I say about 10 to 15 seconds after I say it, is I think what's actually happening. You guys are the one with the delay. So anyway, let's get into this. I've already wasted about 4 minutes just doing an intro. So, protecting your children. This is going to cover generally, what I try to avoid doing is saying things that you will hear a lot. I try to offer a unique perspective and share things that I don't hear a lot of other people saying, but still my honest thoughts, And I only talk about things that I actually am educated on and passionate about, and I make sure that I use, relatable examples and logic so that you can actually follow what I'm saying and you don't get lost. But it's live. And if I ever am not able to make it live, I'll do a premiere. So there will always be a live chat where you can ask questions if you can't follow what I'm saying. So there's room for that. And if you missed it, there's always the comment section afterwards. So, protecting your children. We're gonna start with the first thing that I have written is about the fact that people often think they need to protect their children from the wrong people. And that is the first mistake. People will say, oh, well, don't talk to strangers, don't take candy from a stranger. They think of the dangers their children might face, and they always think of it as being strangers. Now, I could get political, because people often use children as a political leg up in a stance or whatever. Couldn't think of a better, for lack of a better term, but you know what I mean. People will say like, you know, we have to protect you know hear this on both sides. Like, people who are against guns will say it's about protecting children, people who are against the LGBT community will say it's about protecting children. Everybody on all sides of everything seems to be in favor of protecting children, which is kind of ironic that they're both attacking each other when fighting for the same thing. But hopefully this can, you know knock all of the bullshit out of the way, and you can actually focus on what really will protect children at its core. So the truth is, it rarely is someone you don't know that you need to protect your child from. Most of the time that your child is in danger, and I'm specifically right now, I'm talking about like, pedophilia. I'm talking about like getting physically attacked, whether it be like punched in the face, or just violently abused, sexually abused, whatever it might be. It's usually someone the kid already knows, and someone you probably know too. It could be your husband or your wife. It could be your brother or your sister molesting your kid. It could be, the kid's uncle. You know what I mean? Like, it could be a family member. There could be inappropriate things going on even between your other kids. That there could be teachers, priests, doctors. God forbid this happens. Like, it's horrible. But like, it just I just it's sickening to picture a kid just going in for a doctor appointment, and the doctor wants to be left alone with the kid. But it happens. And I hear stories about it, and it's insane. And what really makes me feel very disappointed is that these are the situations the parents seem to be unwilling to do anything about. They'll say don't take candy from a stranger. Some of them don't even do that. Some of them really could not give less of a shit what happens to their kid. But um, they don't realize the people you need to protect your kids from are within your circle. Most of the time, statistics show you don't hear survivors of abuse talking about how they were kidnapped by a complete unknown person one time. Most of the time, usually in that incident, you don't even survive. They'll probably kill you before they let you go back home. Although I'm sure there are some kidnapping incidents where maybe the person doing the kidnapping is a cop, and he knows that he can let you go back because you're not going to tattle on a cop. Maybe he caught you doing something you shouldn't have been doing, and he has dirt on you. A lot of people will do that. So these are the things that actually happen. There's a lot of misconceptions about what happens to children, the kind of danger that children are in. The reality of it is it's pretty dark, but it's not what a lot of people want to believe it is. People don't like reality. People are very uncomfortable with reality. In general, I think people, especially parents, just go by routine. Just do what everyone else is doing. Don't overthink it. Everybody just says, don't take candy from a stranger, so that's all I'm going to do, and that's the extent. But what really bothers me is when they get really passionate about it and angry and start judging other parents and start doing this. It's like, don't throw stones if you live in a glass house. If you're going to start getting righteous, you better have something to show for it. And most of them, unfortunately, don't. So yeah, usually it's not people you know. Um, okay, so I'm gonna move on to the next topic: punishment and reward. Um, yeah, that is a whole thing. I could honestly do an entire separate video about it. I've seen videos about this that I would recommend watching. I don't remember what it's called. There's something about like the grading system is a lie in school or something like that. It's like an hour long or something. I don't know. It might be shorter than that, but it was really interesting, and I remember watching it like a year ago or so, and just being fascinated by it because it resonated, and I knew it was accurate. So what I want to talk about, Zach said, in what way are people judging other parents? Well, parents judge other parents. You hear it all the time. Um, I I just feel like you can think of examples of when even you, if you are a parent, have felt judgmental of other parents. I hear it everywhere I go. If I'm ever out in public, I worked with the public for 17 months. I was in I was in retail and I heard so many people commenting about other people's parenting. Um, and, oftentimes these people didn't really have much to show for it themselves. Some of them did, but some of them, I didn't get a good vibe from them, and I trust my instincts. But that's neither here nor there. It's just, it's a known thing people do. Most people can relate to being judgmental of other people, regardless of the parenting context. So punishment and reward, this system it's designed to keep people oppressed. I don't know how to put it any more plainly than that. That's what it is. The punishment and reward system, in the simplest way I can put it, you can do more research on this. Like I said, I could do a whole video on this. There's a lot more to say. I'm definitely going to discuss it more in depth in my Sunday night live stream, which, definitely tune into that because this is a loaded topic. It's crazy that I'm even trying to condense it into just under 30 minutes. But punishment and reward, the problem with this is that what you're essentially doing, you are effectively training someone to be submissive and obedient. And how does that help? It helps you as a parent, as an authority figure, but what danger might that result in your kid being in the future? What other authority figures might take advantage of the fear that you have instilled in your child to be obedient? And what might also happen when your kid starts to rebel? Why would your kid rebel, right? What reason do they have to rebel? Unless they are annoyed by you, they don't trust you, they don't respect you. Why would your kid not respect you? That is way too normalized. People just expect it. Oh, teenagers rebel, teenagers don't respect their parents. Why? That should not have been normalized. Maybe the problem isn't teenagers just rebel. Maybe the problem is the standards by which we parent need some serious revising because that should not be normal. Children should respect their parents, not because it's what children are made to do, but because the parents should be doing a better job, deserving of respect. And that's the problem. Parents think that they are owed respect by simply birthing you, and they can just do whatever they want from that point, and you still owe them your entire life. That's not realistic. We're all separate human beings. We're all separate individuals, and that will be proven when they abandon you in the nursing home. You can't hold that over their head forever. You are two separate human beings, and you owe each other just the same amount of respect. In fact, I think the fact that you brought them into the world helpless, knowing that they would be helpless, you owe them a lot more than they owe you because they could not take care of themselves and they're only here because you wanted them to be. So you better be doing the things they can't do. You know, teach them to walk, teach them to take care of themselves, but don't get mad at them when you're not doing your part. I personally think you can teach a kid to be respectful and obedient in a loving way. Well, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that is what I'm saying. You can teach kids to be respectful in a loving way. I don't like the word obedient, in general, because obedience, to me, suggests a lack of originality and personality. And I think that every human being alive has a unique perspective that they can offer the earth. And they're not doing themselves or anyone else any favors if they spend their whole lives just trying to be subservient and, work behind other people. Even if you're working for someone, you still have your perspective to offer. If someone hands you a paintbrush, you don't just sit there and say, "What do I paint?" You just pick up the paintbrush and you do something only you could do. There's no right or wrong. Art is art. Art cannot be considered good or bad. It just is. And it's something only you could do. The only thing that can make it bad is if you do it with bad intentions. If you paint a picture with the intention of harming someone, if you're like, I don't know, you paint a swastika in a room full of Jewish people. You know what I mean? Like that's not you just expressing your artistic freedom and your unique perspective on the world. That's you trying to bother people, and you know what you're doing. So let's just be clear about that. People know what they're doing. There's a certain level of awareness that people don't want to own up to, but it's there. And, you know, people just don't like free will. That's what it really comes down to, which that is another thing I could do a whole separate video about. People don't like um, not being told what to do. But I think the reason for that is the punishment reward system. We've been trained to be obedient. We have not been the ability to think for ourselves has not been nurtured. On the contrary, it's been beaten down, and you've been trained that when you step out of the box, when you do your own thing, when you're unique, it's bad. You get crushed into submission and confirmation, or what is the word I'm looking for? Um, conform. That is what I meant to say. It just doesn't sound right. Confirmation sounds like, I don't mean, I don't even know if conformation is a word, but you know what I'm trying to say. So that's all that matters. I'm gonna have to look that up later, but it sounds like I was saying confirm rather than conform. But um, yeah, you got to realize when you do that to your kid, it's not doing your kid any favors. All it's doing is teaching them to be afraid, which in turn will result in them and being more susceptible to being persuaded by people who want to take advantage of them. And we have to realize we live in a world where everybody is trying to take advantage of everybody. Even you are being taken advantage of by oppressive systems in place that you have like no awareness of because it's just been so normalized and you're desensitized to it. You have lowered your expectations and your standards of what you deserve and what you're entitled to. And you judge other people for being entitled, but you know what? Entitlement is a thing, it's very real, but you have to be realistic. It's not entitled to want basic needs like food, water, and shelter, So just think about it for a minute. How we learn. This is important too. I don't think people realize that learning does not happen when someone tries to shove information down your throat. Can you think of the last time you didn't ask someone a question, you weren't interested in a topic, and someone came out of nowhere and tried to educate you on it, and you actually felt grateful? Most of the time, when people are corrected, or when you just start teaching someone about something out of nowhere, they're not interested. And that's not from a place of entitlement or being spoiled. It's just because, that's not how we learn. We learn when our curiosity is nurtured. If you have a kid, try to nurture their sense of wonder about the world. When they ask questions, answer them. Tell them the truth. Don't sugarcoat anything. Tell them what you know. Be real with them. They'll appreciate it and they'll continue asking questions. You have to trust that they'll want to learn. You have to trust that they'll actually want to know more about the world they live in. And believe me, they will. They'll ask you the questions. All you really have to do is be prepared and educated yourself to provide them with the answers. And it's not about controlling them. It's not about, but what if they don't ask the right questions? Then tell them. If you didn't know something and you were about to go on a date with somebody's ex and they were like, "Oh, I wouldn't go on a date with that person." Sure, they didn't ask you to tell them that, but they're going to be grateful you did. So use your common sense. There are situations where sometimes you have to just jump in and say, "Oh, that person's about to wander off a cliff. Maybe they don't know that there's nothing beneath their feet if they keep stepping forward. Let me jump in and save them." Like, sometimes you have to just make an executive decision using common sense, but people take that too far. And then it just, again, leads into the punishment and reward thinking, which people don't actually learn from. I came to this conclusion when I was imagining myself um, coming up with a way to educate children about, like, the realities of what goes on in the world. Um, Let me see if this is a separate thing. I've kind of talked about the next two topics already. This has kind of become one thing. The next two things I have written are trust goes both ways and sex and religion. So I'm going to talk about both of these things at the same time because I think that they're kind of connected. So talking about how we learn, it does lead into trust. So trust goes both ways. It really does. You can't just expect your kid to trust you if you don't trust them. And if your kid doesn't trust you, there is no amount of controlling that you can be that's going to actually stop them. I know someone whose parents have a conservatorship and a guardianship over them, and in my opinion, based on everything I know about the situation, it is completely unjustified and way over the line. Like, they are completely disrespecting this guy's autonomy. He's 21 years old and he has no freedom. He's effectively a prisoner, and he didn't even do anything. It's insane, and they're using the fact that he's autistic as an excuse, which he's, very, as far as I can tell, so high functioning that you wouldn't even know if he didn't tell you. And apparently the last time he was diagnosed was when he was a kid, so who even knows? Like, it's kind of a vague diagnosis in the first place. I think there's also ADHD and, like, I don't know, whatever, but it's still like it doesn't affect him. You can have completely normal, rational, intelligent conversations with him, and yet he is treated like a child who can't take care of himself. And yet, he still finds ways to get around them. He still finds ways to be sneaky. He kind of has no choice because that's his only way to get, you know, a sense of respect for himself and basic freedom is to just be sneaky and cheat. So what you're effectively teaching someone to do is to work around your rules. You're teaching someone how to cheat, how to be dishonest, because you're not giving them what they're already owed. So they feel cheated, which is why they feel entitled to cheat. Um, they'll find sneaky ways to get what they think you owe them. So if you tell a kid that they can't go see their friend because you don't like that friend, and you don't actually sit and have a rational human conversation with them, the same way that you would if you were warning your friend who's about to start dating your abusive ex, you know, like you have to talk to them like they're a person who can comprehend what you're saying, and they'll feel respected. You know, and still give them the freedom to make the right choice. And still, you know, obviously use your common sense. If it truly is way too dangerous to risk, then you know, you might have to make an executive decision and just say, I cannot allow this to happen. You're gonna get killed. But be realistic. Use your intuition too. Use your gut instinct. Learn how to trust that. There's another thing I could do a separate video about. Um, but anyway, you have to trust yourself and say, okay, you know what? He's my kid's not gonna die. Worst case scenario is my kid learns his lesson the hard way. But or maybe he's right. That's what a lot of parents don't consider. Maybe my kid is right. Maybe my fears are a little bit outdated or irrational. Maybe I should just let him go and see what happens. But you know, that's parents don't like doing that, unfortunately. And it just damages, not only does it damage the relationship that you have with your kid, but they're gonna do it anyway. They're just gonna sneak out the window, you know, they're gonna find a way to do it, and then it'll be even less safe. And then when you tell them the truth in the future and try to prevent them from doing something dangerous, they're less inclined to believe you. You've become the enemy in their life. You may fancy yourself as their best friend. You know, you may think, oh, I'm super close with my kid. We're tight, we're best buds. But are you really? Or is that one-sided? Is that only in your head? Some kids think that about their parents too. They think, "Oh, I'm really close with my mom." But you have to understand how low the standards are for that. Like the bar has been lowered insanely to the point where people will say things like that even if their parent is disrespectful and controlling. Disrespect and control has been normalized. So people don't think of that as a sign of not being as close as you could be. Would your friend say that to you? Would you say that to a friend? What your parent is doing and saying to you right now, would you say that to a friend of yours? Would you do that to anyone? Probably not. So be realistic. It doesn't mean that you have to hate them, but definitely don't just let them get away with it. Call them out on it. You know, the way that you would want to be called out if you were doing something inappropriate or disrespectful to someone else. So, you know, sex and religion, that was what I was imagining teaching kids about. Because not religion per se, but you know, for some reason I put those two things together. I must have been thinking something when I wrote that because I was going on a little monologue in my head last night trying to prepare for this, and you know, I must have had a different format because when I wrote those two things down, it made sense that they were together. But now I don't remember what I was thinking. Anyway, I think that children. Oh, hey, there it is. Now I remember. Okay, so the only reason that sex has been stigmatized as something that's inappropriate, taboo, kids shouldn't know about it is because of religion. And I thought about it. There is literally absolutely nothing in nature, in instincts, in intuition that would have ever led anyone to the conclusion that sex is a bad thing, that people should hide and never talk about, that it's something that, you know, people should pretend doesn't happen, you know, when they're in public. Literally the only reason people do that is religion, and I find it very odd and very ironic since there's no denying even in religion that sex is how we haven't gone extinct. It's one of the most fundamental aspects of, you know, continuing to have more people in the world. So it's very odd that it's considered taboo, and we don't think children are old enough to learn about that. People say that, but they have zero logic behind it. You know, people get, you know, I probably just made some of you uncomfortable saying children should learn about sex. They're like, oh, but at the right age. And it's like, what do you mean the right age? Where the hell did you get that number from? Whatever you think the right age is, where did you get that from? Do you think that by teaching children about sex, you're setting them up to be in sexual situations? That you're telling them to have sex? that you're setting them up to, I don't know, get kidnapped or molested, or that you're putting them in dangerous situations. People have such a weird thing. It's like you think that if you educate a child on sex, that somehow you're being inappropriate with them or you're setting them up to do something inappropriate. It's all nonsense. Just all of it. And you have to be willing to break that down. You have to be willing to challenge these things that we've been brought up to believe, because there's no logic behind it at all. You have to examine things instead of just taking it and being like, okay, I guess so. Even if it's something you've believed for a really long time and it's like hardwired into your brain, if it doesn't belong there, work on getting it out. You have to deprogram from this thinking because it's hurting you. And let me explain how. Okay, um, how does not teaching your kids about sex harm them? Well, first of all, in the years that you aren't teaching them about sex, they're hearing about it in indirect ways. They're catching innuendos and not knowing what it means. And probably before you actually are ready to teach them about it, they're going to hear about it in a way that you can't control, from friends, from, media, online. They're maybe going to start exploring their own bodies and they're not going to know what they're even doing. They might be really scared and think, what is happening? Why is my body doing this? What's going on? What does this mean? Or why does that guy want to do this with me? Or why does that girl want to, what's happened? Like, you're letting them just be naive and confused for a long time. And then by the time they do learn about it, they've already been exposed to all the stigmatization. So then they're going to think of it as taboo and they're going to be like, gross, I don't want to think about that. Wait a minute, you and dad, oh, like, this is unnecessary and so easily avoidable if you just tell them about it before they're exposed to the stigma. Tell them as soon as they're able to understand and have conversations with you. I don't care how young they are. If you can have a conversation with them, if you can level with them at any age, you can explain how babies are made. And you don't have to do it out of nowhere. You don't have to corner them and sit them down. They'll ask. Trust me. They'll ask you. They'll wonder about it. It doesn't have to be a, hey dad, how are babies are made? It could just be, maybe they see a woman who's pregnant and they're like, I wonder how that happened, or they just make a comment about it, or they say something inaccurate, like, when did the store drop it off? And you just correct them. You don't have to do it out of nowhere. You can let the kid lead you there. So that way, you're doing what I said. How do we learn? That way, you're actually teaching them at a time that they're receptive to learning, instead of just cornering them and forcing them to learn, which is why people fail in school. Not only does school not account for neurodivergence and different types of thinking, disabilities, people who just function differently. It's not like, it's like school was, just not literally, but just as an example, an analogy or a metaphor. It's as if school was made for people who are right-handed, and it doesn't account for people who are left-handed. So a left-handed person whose handwriting is messier than someone with a right hand because they're forced to use their right hand to write, they get a bad grade, but it's because they weren't allowed to use their left hand. That's what I mean. Like, the bad writing is graded the same, but they were not treated fairly. They weren't given what they really needed. And that is a serious problem. Disability rights is not something to take lightly. It's everywhere. There's all sorts of injustice regarding that. And it's physical disabilities, it's mental disabilities, and not even disabilities, but just different. Like, left-handed isn't really a disability. You can write, you can do it just fine. You're just doing it differently than how other people do it. So be realistic about this shit. And know that it's the you could be judging your kid for something that isn't even your kid's fault, because too many things are not taken into account. You cannot be giving your kids bad grades, like, because your kid gets your you can't be punishing your kids for getting bad grades. You shouldn't be punishing your kid in the first place. Punishment, like I said, it's a lazy excuse to avoid leveling with your kid and trusting your kid. Punishment is what you do when you just want to condition your kid to respect authority and you see yourself as an authority figure. So, you just want your kid to do what you say. But what you don't realize is it's going to have the opposite effect. There's a reason that kids rebelling and sneaking around is such a common thing. I promise you, if you trust your kid, you're going to have to relax, you're going to have to trust yourself too. You will ultimately have so much more to show for it, and that goes for all areas of life. You have to be willing to let go of control sometimes, or you're going to be constantly miserable. Um, so I know it's hard, but parenting is where I see it the most. So what was I on? Religion. Oh yeah, and how it actually leads to protecting your children. So what you're going to be doing if you're not educating your kids on sex, imagine this. You educate your kids on sex, they fully understand it. They understand it's pretty simple actually. I mean, this is really all it is. Um, an egg needs to be fertilized. Period. You could even explain this to them if they wonder why there aren't live chickens in the eggs they buy at the store. You know, there's like you just say, oh well, they're not fertilized eggs, and then they'll say, what does that mean? You could just explain it to them and be like, humans are kind of the same way. All mammals do this. It's just humans don't lay eggs, but they you know how it works is like um there's how there's like male and female, right? Like, girls have different bodies than boys. You get that, right? And they'll be like, yeah, of course. That's pretty evident. You don't need to be looking at their genitals to tell that, men and women have different bodies. It's pretty obvious, just all around. Well, the anatomy of a male and the anatomy of a female are both required in order to create a new life. And they'd be like, oh, okay, I guess that makes sense. Kind of like 1 + 1 = 2. So then, you know, uh, what happens is the parts that are unique just basically come together, um, that's that. You could give as many details as you want, as long as you aren't being needlessly like inappropriate to the point where you're like, I don't know, giving the kids more details than they might need or want. But as long as they understand the basics of it, it's not that big of a deal. But then they'll understand what's happening to their own bodies. They'll understand, you should explain how sex plays out in culture, why people mention it all the time. It's because it feels good, and it would have to in order for us to keep doing it. That's why, by our nature, if we're going to keep reproducing, we need to enjoy the act of reproduction. That's pretty logical. You could explain that to a kid. Um, and then that's why so many people talk about it. That's why you see and hear it everywhere. There's all sorts of ways to refer to it while being indirect. There's other names for it. There's all sorts of things. And so it's just like the way that our bodies work. Um, so if you explain this to your kid, then they're going to be more educated going out into the world. And if you also explain how religion and the patriarchy and all sorts of other systems like capitalism, these things that exist to basically just take advantage of people, um, there are a lot of systems at play where people want to manipulate others for personal gain. If I can get you to do this and pay you as little as possible, I'm going to do it because then I'll have more money. People generally, it's not cynical, it's realistic to say people generally care more about themselves than other people. And it's, there's a million reasons for it. The way people are raised, there could be, a million things. It's not your business. You don't have to judge that person, get involved in their business. But all you need to know is if their behavior is not appropriate and if you should not be responding to it. Teach them about grooming and how some people might say things like, oh, you're so mature for your age. I see something in you. You have a genuine talent. There's really something there, This is amazing. Um, Look out for that kind of shit. That is serious. And if kids are warned about it, if kids actually have a sense of fulfillment from home and they're not out looking for people to validate them and say, oh, you're so mature for your age and you have this great gift and I believe in you, and then they start exploiting everything that you're willing to do for them, I'll support you, but I'm going to need a little something, quid pro quo. It's just, you can teach your children about these things, and I promise you, that is the most effective way to protect them from it. You cannot protect them from it by going out and voting in a certain way to change laws. They're never going to change these laws. These are the people who are in power. They benefit from it. We need to start at home, educate our children, get them passionate about justice, and they will change the system themselves. They'll just take that power right into their own hands. And suddenly, the guy who's going to groom that teenage girl, he doesn't have any power because she isn't giving it to him. So instead of you going in there and trying to take his power away from him, empower your kid to protect herself. You know? Let her know how she deserves to be treated, or him know how he deserves to be treated. And make sure that they know what is never acceptable and what they should never just tolerate um, happening to themselves. No exceptions. It doesn't matter if it's someone you love. No one should be allowed to disrespect you or treat you like less than human, or try to exploit you and not fairly pay you back. No one is entitled to your time, your energy. your money. People ask for favors all the time, try to be sympathetic. Oh, please, I'm so broke. And it's like, well, so am I. And you don't see me going around begging for handouts. And people are like, oh, I'm so bored. Please just call me. I just want to talk. And then they just sit there and expect you to do all the work and entertain them. People need to know that this is unacceptable behavior and it should not be indulged. Entertain yourself. Figure something out. You're a grown up, you can do this. It's not my responsibility to entertain you. It's not my responsibility to give you money. That doesn't mean I won't help you out if you're in a jam. But that doesn't mean you're entitled to ask for it. It's my choice to help you out. I didn't owe it to you. And that's what authentic friendships are for. We'll want to help each other out. There's no need for all the backstory and oh, poor woe is me. You shouldn't have to do that if it's an authentic friendship of two people who actually care about each other and want to support each other. That doesn't mean they'll never give each other money, but they'll be able to decide on their own when it really is and isn't appropriate to do that. Sometimes it isn't appropriate to accept money from people, but in general, I think, especially in this economy, if someone offers you money, just take it. Um, but that's neither here nor there. Anyway, I think I've wrapped this up pretty much. I've covered everything. So I'm going to end this. Thank you very much for watching. If you want to hear more thoughts on this, tune in on Sunday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. The link to that channel is in the description. I know I've said that a couple times, but just if you missed it, if you skipped around or whatever. Um, Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. I appreciate every like, comment, subscription. I have YouTube is always trying to screw me. So every bit of interaction helps. Um, in conclusion, what I just want to say to wrap this up is that the best thing you can do for your children is to trust them and make sure that they trust you. And the best way to make sure they trust you is by trusting them. Use your common sense. Um, So don't just trust them to not wander off a cliff. Sometimes it looks like they're gonna take those steps. So jump in and save them. But use your common sense and trust them and empower them. Make sure that they have the information. Make sure you're telling them the truth. You're educating them about the truth in the world. And don't be afraid. Don't just say, oh, well, that's not right. We're not supposed to do that. Who decided? Religion. That's the answer. Well, where did religion get their information from? Probably in history, people who were intuitive, who were paying attention to other things going on in the world, and that's why it's all different. That's why everybody came up with different but similar religions. Pay attention to the similarities, but also pay attention to the fact that humans, and this tracks if you look at history, love controlling each other, and it's always patriarchy. It's always men trying to control women because I think in general women are superior, just like in almost every way, and the goal is to convince them that they aren't, so that they don't try to fight back. But as soon as they start trying to fight back, they're gonna win. And that's you can just see it right now. Like men don't even know what to do with themselves because the patriarchy is beginning to crumble, and men are starting to be treated more appropriately to how they behave, and they don't know what to do with themselves. So there we go. There's the evidence right there. Women stay composed and men just break down and start whining and complaining that they're not getting enough attention. And that's just really sad. They spiral into just dark patterns of thinking and get obsessed with conspiracy theories and hate and just want to be mad at the world while women take care of themselves, support each other and thrive and try to make the world a better place. And they're never going to be able to do that if they just keep indulging in babysitting men. Men need to grow up and they need to stop being indulged. That's what needs to happen. And we need to encourage a society of children who understand that it's not about hating men. Men can do it too. If men stop whining and begging for attention, they could join women in trying to make the world a better place. There's even women who do this. It's women who are still upholding the patriarchy who still believe it's their duty to just be subservient to men, which is really unfortunate. They don't think that's what they're doing, most of them anyway. Some of them are that blatant about it, but some of them think that they're independent and think that they're doing the right thing. But really, if you really examine their behavior, they're just upholding the systems that men built to control women. So, you know, these people can try all they want to act like they're oppressed, but the truth is, it's not men who are the problem. It's what men have done. And you could just stop feeding that. Stop begging for attention like you're all that matters in the world. And do what women have had to do for centuries. Pick yourself up and take care of yourself, because no one is coming to save you. Um, Women have had to take care of themselves and men for a long time. So educate your children. Teach them the truth. It's not indoctrination, it's just reality. And you can see it for yourself just by paying attention. And that's the important thing too. You should make sure your kid nurture your kid's sense of curiosity about the world. Don't just like shove your political and spiritual and whatever worldviews down their throat. Let them figure things out on their own. See what conclusions they draw. And if they ask you questions, tell them what you believe, and be clear about what is a belief and what is a fact. And I know it's hard sometimes because a lot of people think their beliefs are facts, but this is another young human being we're talking about. You have a responsibility to check yourself and not just be arrogant and say, well, this is just the truth because I think so. Humble yourself. You're in the presence of someone who is going to outlive you, but ideally, um, try to do your best. So yeah, that's kind of what I have to say, wrapping it up. um, I know I went on longer than 30 minutes, but I just wanted to make sure that I gave you a clear summary of what I tried to learn. So, I think religion comes. I just realized I didn't finish what I was saying about religion. I think religion comes from other intuitive people around the world who were observing and learning things, and it just got tainted by the human desire to control other people. So look out for the aspects of religion that are just about control and don't have any logic or reason behind them. Like there's spiritual beliefs, like two feather in like, um, I don't know, like Indian tribes and Native Americans and stuff who believed that LGBT people were um, to be looked up to for advice. They weren't told that they're bad for being different or told that they should have kids and that they're wrong, but they were just like, oh, well, every community has a couple people like this. We look to them for advice because they tend to be more creative and intelligent. And I think that's why did we stop doing that? It's crazy, it's crazy because crazy people took over and tried to confuse sane people and brainwash them and disempower them, and it's time for that to stop. So you can start by empowering your own children. That's really the bottom line. And uh, question the things that you've been blindly believing just because religion said so. Well, what gave religion the right to say so? Even if religion, does try to teach you something, shouldn't it still make sense? You should never take anything at face value just because God said so. Well, if God is really the most important, all powerful being in the universe, wouldn't that imply or kind of inherently come with some amount of logic that you could understand as being part of that universe that God created? Wouldn't it make sense if God said, do this or don't do this? Wouldn't you be able to say, yeah, that makes complete sense, I can understand why? But a lot of things that God says it doesn't really track. So be realistic, question things that you've been told, and know that there is a lot of human tampering regarding religion. Doesn't mean that there's no truth in the religion, but I have never seen a single religion that was 100% truth. There's always at least one aspect of it that was tampered with by humans and by ego and greed and fear and manipulation and control. So just look out for it. Don't blindly trust anything. It's irresponsible, especially if you have children. Um, Thank you for watching. To go more in depth, I went pretty in depth today, if I'm being honest, but like I said, there's still more to discuss. There were about 3 points where I said I could do a separate video on it, so um, we'll go more in depth on that on Sunday night. Tune in at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you then. Unless you don't want to tune in. Maybe this was enough for you.